Hi, I'm Nicholeen Peck, and I teach all over the world about parenting, good communication, family relationships, all through the lens of self-government. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about the 4 allegiances and why you do what you do. Did you know that you might be having an allegiance that you didn't want to have? What is allegiance? Let's talk about that. Let's also talk about the 4 different allegiances that a person could have and why that's so powerful in our lives. Have you ever wondered why you keep making the same behavior choice again and again when you knew you didn't want to do it? Well, it could actually be because you're having the wrong allegiance at the time. You may not even know that. Think of some of the things that you might do. You might say, I am not going to eat sugar, and then you do. Or you might say, I am going to wake up early in the morning and exercise, and then you don't. Why does that happen? I am not going to judge people anymore, and then I judge someone. Why do we do stuff like that? It's because there are actually multiple different allegiances, and we can choose who we want to follow at any given time. So let's talk about allegiance and what that really means. Allegiance is what you honor, right? It's like who you honor or what you honor. Think of if you're a patriotic person. I know I'm from the United States, so we pledge allegiance to the flag, right? We put our hand over our heart, symbolic of our love and respect and honor of our country, and then we pledge allegiance to our country. We say, we will do certain things. This is who we are as a person who's part of this country. So when you have allegiance, it's you choosing to follow a particular idea, voice, person, concept, country, maybe Hollywood star. You could have allegiance to all kinds of things, but generally speaking, there are only 4 allegiances. So there basically are 4 things or people that you can follow. Even though everyone on YouTube is creating a following and people on Instagram and all the social medias want you to follow them and buy the products that they like, at the end of the day, they are just agents for one of 4 allegiances. They have an allegiance and they're hoping they can convince you to have the same allegiance that they have. And you know what? That's what I'm trying to do too. I'm hoping that if I tell you about the 4 allegiances and you see which one is my favorite, that you will like that allegiance too. And that somehow it might speak to your heart and you decide, I think that that's the allegiance that's mine too, and I better more deliberately follow it. I definitely believe in being deliberate, but if you don't know your options or the full information, you can't be deliberate. So I think a lot of people end up showing allegiance or following people that they actually did not plan to follow or did not want to follow. Maybe they had a moment of weakness or they just didn't have a deliberate plan. But if you know who could be followed, then hopefully you'll make a better plan. So let's talk about those allegiances now. So let's talk about these 4 different allegiances. I'm going to make some quadrants on my board for the 4 different types of allegiance that a person could have. Number 1 allegiance that a person could have is they could have an allegiance to good or goodness. You could even say God because it actually comes from the root word God. Okay, so if you're a religious person, that's where you're going to go. The word good actually means God-like is what it means. So if I have an allegiance to doing good things or trying to be a good person, then ultimately I'm trying to be who I think I ought to be because of God. Okay, and so that's where the goodness comes from. Now, I guess we could have a social standard on goodness, and then when we pull away from God actually, and we just have society here as the God, that kind of changes things a little bit, and you'll see as we talk about the other allegiances. So really, true goodness should end up pointing back to God. That's an allegiance that people have, okay? When a person has an allegiance to God, then that means they think in their mind, what would God do? Okay? And then, am I doing what God would do? Okay? Are my actions in alignment? And they also are going to be thinking on a regular basis. So we'll say, what do I do? And then they're going to think to themselves, how should I change? So here's 3 questions. And there's probably others, but those are 3 main things. This is the process. What would God do? Wait, what do I do? How should I make a change so that I'm in better alignment with God or with goodness? That's going to be the first allegiance that a person would have. And just so you know, it happens to be my favorite allegiance if you haven't already understood that. But this allegiance is the one that leads you away from just your own selfish desires, where the other allegiances can trap you in selfish desires. So let's talk a little bit about those other allegiances. Before we talk about the other 3 allegiances, click that subscribe button now. There is a lot of great content on this channel, all about self-government. And I'm hoping that you've noticed already that an allegiance to goodness is actually the same process as governing yourself. So we need to learn more and more about self-government, right? So click on the subscribe button now, because all the videos on this channel go back to that principle of self-government so that you can have more freedom and be more in charge of you. And don't forget the notification bell either, because then you'll be notified when new videos come out. So let's take a brief second and talk about self-government. I said at the beginning of this video that I teach parenting through the lens of self-government. So what in the world does that mean? That means that a person possesses a knowledge of the cause and effect of any given situation, and then has a knowledge of their own behaviors so that they can control them. That means that they understand cause and effect, and they understand themselves. So they say, who ought I to be? Uh-oh, there we go, pointing right back at goodness again. Who ought I to be? And then what do I do? How might I need to make a change? So do you see how the principle of self-government actually brings people back to an allegiance to goodness? So that's how you know that's my allegiance. That's the one I'm hoping and praying that you'll pick. But let's talk about the other allegiances too, so that you know your options. Allegiance number 2 is an allegiance to evil or bad. Now, most people do not have an allegiance to evil or bad, okay? All the time. I mean, this would not be a very constant. If you're arguing with someone and you're like, I will win, I will dominate, they will feel pain, I want retribution, or vindication. Okay, at that moment, you are not doing a good thing. Okay, you are at that moment trying to do something bad to somebody else, and you could have an allegiance at that moment to doing the bad thing. I do have a concern about this. I feel like it's on the rise, as I've been noticing, watching people around me, a lot of young people getting into a lot of dark things. Okay, I mean, when we're talking evil here, we're talking about the opposite of God, right? So there's darkness versus light right there. There's a lot of people getting into dark things. I've noticed as I've met with families and with youth around the world that there are a lot of young people who are really getting trapped in dark ideas. They are feeling like they want to pretend the darkness, be the darkness. They want to get into it, experiment with it. And there's even a lot of people who are kind of getting out of their heads, like they're having psychological problems because they're getting into dark. A very interesting thing that can happen. So what does a person who has an allegiance to evil or bad think? Okay, or what types of questions might they ask? Well, they're probably not going to be asking as many questions. They're going to be making statements. Statements like, how do I get what I want? They might ask a question like, how do I dominate other people? So they might talk about domination. They might make statements such as, everyone is bad anyway. They might say there is no bad, there is no evil, okay? Without opposites, is anything ever good? Like we gotta ask ourselves that. I mean, I'm a pretty logical person, a lot of deductive reasoning going on in my head. anytime somebody says to me, there is no bad, there is no evil, then I say, well, then there is no good, right? And if there's no dark, how can there be even light, right? Is there even such thing as dark and light? Or are we all in some just like brainwashed state? No, I don't think so. I think there definitely is opposites. I think there's a ton of proof to that. There's hard and soft and dark and light and good and bad. And so whenever somebody tries to convince you of an untruth that there is no bad, then you know that at that point, they actually want to be able to do any bad and not have it called bad. Why would you not want it called bad? If there's no bad, why do you care, right? Some people actually even do relish in being the bad or the evil, but I would say those people are very rare. I would say there's not very many people who've sold their souls to the devil, okay? Or whatever it is. I mean, that's going to be the more off chance. But people can get trapped in this because of their emotions and their feelings of hatred toward other people or toward their circumstances. So when you're in this situation right here, you're definitely selfish and not grateful. And by the way, I should say that I learned all of this actually from a philosopher. His name was Oliver DeMille. I happened to be at an event where I was listening to him speak, and he started talking about allegiances and how there could be these 4 different allegiances. And I went, holy cow! He has really zeroed in on something here. And the more and more I studied, I remembered those allegiances. And I thought, oh, that's true. That person has an allegiance to bad, or that person has an allegiance to good, or one of the other allegiances. And so that was something that ended up being in the back of my head. And I realized the power of who we follow, whoever we have an allegiance to, whether it's good or bad, or some of these others over here, that actually dictates our purpose in life. That's huge. It's huge. So I'll be grateful for Oliver DeMille for coming up with, or I shouldn't say coming up with, but recognizing these allegiances. So let's talk about allegiance number 3. So the third allegiance that a person might have is an allegiance to self. An allegiance to self, okay? So this means that you really care a lot about your feelings. How do I feel is going to be one of your questions that you're going to ask on a regular basis. How do I feel? Okay, how can I feel better, right? And who can make me feel better, or what can make me feel better? So these feelings just really, we get very preoccupied with the feelings. But there's also, what do I want? Okay, what do I want is also going to be a big question that we're going to ask as well. You know, what do I get? Okay, we could say get over here also. What do I get? Okay, so there's a bit of entitlement here, okay, that comes with, oops, that was a bad circle. But anyway, a bit of entitlement that comes with this self focus. So if you have an allegiance to yourself, then you're constantly trying to do things for yourself. When you look at a situation, you're going to dish yourself the biggest piece of cake and give everybody else the others. Okay? That's when you have an allegiance to self. And there's a lot of different examples that we could use right there to explain that. And I'm sure you're thinking right now, oh, that person might have an allegiance to self. That person might have an allegiance to self. It's very easy to see those types of people are oftentimes very draining to be around because everything is about them. So let's talk about allegiance number 4. Allegiance number 4 is an allegiance to others. Allegiance to others. Now, there are some people, I would say that actually in this day and age, I see less of this. Probably in past generations, you might see more people with an allegiance to others. And it seems like that could be a very charitable thing, but let me just tell you why this is also a bent allegiance that you don't want to get into. Now, if you're going to be doing service for somebody, and you're going to do it because it's the good thing to do, and because you value that person, because over here we have principles and values and all that kind of stuff, and a principle is that every person's valuable, so you're going to serve them, then that's an allegiance to God. But if you're going to serve other people because when they feel a certain way, that makes you feel a certain way, then that's an allegiance to others. So there are some people who are like, well, I only know I'm a good person if other people are happy, right? So I'm going to help that other person be happy. I'm going to do everything I can to make them happy, to give them what they want. I'm going to hopefully make it so that I can control them. So this is a way to control other people's happiness. So you might ask a question like, how do I control another person? Or how do I make another person do whatever it is? Or how does that other person feel? So you might say, how do they feel? And then a lot of people who have an allegiance to others, what they do is they mirror feelings. So they assume if that other person feels good and happy, that they can feel good and happy. But if that other person does not feel good and happy, then they can't feel good and happy. So there's a lot of mirroring that goes on with this allegiance to others as well. So that's, in a nutshell, the 4 allegiances that a person might have. Now let's see here the power of the allegiance to good and the allegiance to God. Because this is the only one that really isn't consumed with what the other person gets. So you could almost say that all 3 of these are an allegiance to bad because they all point back to what I get. What am I going to get out of it? They all have a selfish bent to them. This person wants to feel good, so they want to make everyone else feel good so that they feel good. This person just really wants all their feelings to be made better by somebody else. They just want someone to come in and fix it. These two would be a good combination for each other, right? But in the end, this is all about self and about I too. So the only one that's not about I and about self and what I get out of it is an allegiance to good and allegiance to God, because this one is saying, wait, who ought I to be? Now the self is willing to make a change. This is the only one where a person makes a change, really changes themselves. Everything else is passive. Everything else is passive. This one is your assertive, active allegiance. It's pretty powerful, isn't it? If you've liked learning about allegiances, I know you are going to love a lot more about self-government. So you can go to my website, teachingselfgovernment.com. On that website, I've got articles and videos, classes and books, things that you can learn more about controlling yourself, strengthening your relationships, and making it so that you can better live according to the allegiance that you want to. If you have an allegiance to good in your family, and if you can help your whole family understand allegiances and have allegiance to good, then you will have increased family unity. But you might need some skills to help you pull off the problem solving, even though that's your allegiance. Because if your problem solving skills aren't where they need to be, then you can end up falling into an allegiance to self, others, or even bad. So make sure to get the help you need. Go to teachingselfgovernment.com today.